It happens fairly often when you're staying in a downtown hotel. You're eating in the smallest coffee shop trying to save a few dollars, or maybe even hiking a couple of blocks to the nearest Wendy's. But there in the main ballroom of your hotel is a huge gala black tie affair. They have punch bowl fountains spraying out pink champagne. There's a dance band set up in one corner. The place is filled with the finest china. Bouquets are everywhere. And milling all around are 800 guests who are about to sit down to a $55 a plate dinner. Of course, you're not invited, but you do notice all of the glitter and the gold as you go back to your room with your Wendy's French fry wrappers and little packs of ketchup. In Philip Yancey's book, What's So Amazing About Grace, he shares an anecdote from the Boston Globe in June of 1990. A young lady had gone with her fiancé to the Hyatt Hotel there in town to order their wedding banquet. Both of them had Cadillac tastes. And before they'd finished picking this and that off the menu, they'd signed their names to a contract for a $13,000 shindig. So they wrote a check for half that amount as a down payment and went home to start licking the wedding envelopes. Well, bad news. The very day the envelopes were supposed to go in the mail, the groom got cold feet. "I'm not sure," he said. Let's wait. Let's postpone." The young woman, angry of course, drove down to the Hyatt to try to call off the big black tie party. But the events manager shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "By the way, your contract is written. You're stuck. That's all there is to it. We could refund you 10%, just $1,300, but the rest can't be returned." Do you know what this Boston socialite decided to do? Since she was going to lose 90% of her 13 grand anyway, she decided to go ahead and have the party. Not a wedding party anymore, thanks to her gutless boyfriend, but a party nonetheless. So she dug in her purse, paid the rest of the bill, and then hosted the biggest, boldest, most boogieing party Boston had ever seen for all of the down-and-outers in the city and on the streets. That's right. Here's how Yancey caps off this odd, wonderful story. And so it was that in June of 1990, the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Boston hosted a party such as it had never seen before. The hostess changed the menu to boneless chicken in honor of the groom, she said, and sent invitations to rescue missions and homeless shelters. That warm summer night, people who were used to peeling half-gnawed pizza off the cardboard dined instead on chicken cordon bleu. Hyatt waiters in tuxedos served hors d'oeuvres to senior citizens, propped up by crutches and aluminum walkers. Bag ladies, vagrants, and addicts took one night off from the hard life on the sidewalks outside and instead sipped champagne, ate chocolate wedding cake, and danced to big band melodies late into the night. Well, it's a wonderful story, but really the first telling of this socially upside-down event comes from the mouth of Jesus himself. "I can't afford your free tuxedo." In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus is right in the middle of telling several stories. And if you go back one chapter, you find that his main audience was not too friendly, made up mostly of priests and rabbis and the elders of the church. This was the religious establishment of the day, and we think of Pharisees and Sadducees and their hard, humorless faces, their eagerness to catch this teacher from Galilee in a moment of heresy. Well, Jesus begins this Hyatt Hotel story. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. We're always tempted when we read stories like these to immediately assign the characters. The king represents God, of course. And so the son in this wedding story would be Jesus himself. No wonder Christ used parables. The priests and Pharisees would have never stood still for it if Jesus openly told his story on himself. But notice we have here two invitations. An earlier invitation had been given, and now the king's servants went from door to door to the selected upper-crust guests, just as a reminder, a follow-up invitation. One commentary noted this: even today, it's common in Oriental cultures to honor special guests by sending out personal envoys. And it's at least hinted that these envoys were knocking on the doors of people who had previously agreed to come. It already RSVP'd. Who then would be the people on this first guest list? Well, one might answer, the children of Israel, since they were the original chosen people. All through the Old Testament, God had invited them to be a special relationship to himself. Through the Old Testament prophets and sacred writings, this first invitation had been sent. And certainly this first list of potential honorees would include the religious people of Jesus' days, the priests, the teachers of truth. So it might well be that some of those standing there in the crowd hearing this story noted that they too were in the narrative. But they refused to come. Israel, of course, had said yes to God in a generic sense. Maybe remember that famous line right after God gave them the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. All that the Lord has said, we will do. That's Exodus 24. Here in Jesus' day, they certainly considered that they were full-fledged members of the wedding party. They were the seed of Abraham. But when it came right down to honoring the Son of God, the bridegroom, they said no. They couldn't make it after all. So the generous king sent out some more limousines and hired a more prestigious messenger service. Please do come, these ambassadors begged. The king has gone to a lot of trouble, and this is for his son. You wouldn't want to miss that, would you? Please. You said you'd come. And plus, the king's already had the big dinner prepared. The steaks are sizzling and the Dom Perignon is chilled just right. That's non-alcoholic, of course. Twice in a row here in these parables, we find a God who kills the fatted calf. He spares no expense to show his feelings for the subjects of his kingdom. And as Jesus tells the story, the people on God's A list, they just give a big shrug. I can't make it, they say. Who wants to be a millionaire is on that night, and I don't know how to program on my VCR. I've got to go check my field and see if my radishes are growing. I've got to attend my business affairs. Even though these people offer a pretense of loyalty to the king and accept his protection and rulership, when it comes right down to it, they don't want to honor him or his son. In fact, verse 6 says that some of these people grabbed the messengers, dragged them out of the palace limos, and beat them up. In a couple of neighborhoods, they even killed them. So this is nearly a state of civil war. Interestingly, verse 7 does have one moment, one display of royal strength. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Well, there's a sober message right here. The king is loving and kind and eager to provide a banquet feast for his people. But when people give him the ultimate brush off, when they turn their backs on heaven and say, sorry, I'm not interested, that is a very serious thing. Especially when men and women pick up rocks or guns and drive away God's chosen prophet, or even just send him packing with words. That is a very serious thing. God certainly does want every citizen on this planet inside his banquet hall. The Bible says so many times. But it also teaches that those who blatantly and willfully defy this invitation and reject the messenger sent by the king will miss the wedding, the feast, and eventually life itself. Well, what happens next? The king throws open the banquet doors of that Hyatt hotel. Go get anybody, he says. Anybody. Anywhere. Go into the back alleys. Go into the bars. Go into the brothels. The casinos and slot machine addicts. Go from door to door finding sick people, poor people. Good people, bad people, losers and lonely people. Go find the people who haven't darkened the door of a church in the last 30 years, but just once in a while maybe listen to religious radio. This king cranks up his printing press and engraves invitation with everyone's names on them. You get one, I get one. Our neighbors get them. The postman delivering them to our front doors gets one himself. Maybe you've always been outside the hotel looking in as well-dressed couples went in, and you could hear the faint sounds of the orchestra and just barely smell the hot buttered rolls, the salads, the desserts. But you never thought God's invitation was for you. Preachers get invited. People like Martin Luther, Billy Graham, and the Pope, they have an invitation, but not you. Until right now. In fact, you're the guest of honor.